I was originally going to make a video solely talking about Artemis. The plan was to start a new series where I defended certain characters, ideas, story moments, or twists that I think the readers dislike too much. Artemis was going to start this series out, since I was surprised by how many people really didn't like her. How many people in my comments, in the comments of Olympus, on Instagram, and surprisingly podcasts of all places. Not a lot of people like Artemis, which was interesting to me. Artemis has always had a pretty important role in all of Olympus. She's a big reason that the story is even happening, being one of Persephone's first Olympus friends, giving her a place to stay while she's going to school, even being one of the very few gods who was willing to stand up against Demeter about her rigiding parent style. However, Artemis's importance isn't always a good thing. Being one of Persephone's only Olympus friends was problematic when Zeus baited her into a bow challenge while comparing her to Apollo. And speaking of that, not great god. The biggest and I think only reason Persephone and Apollo meet is because Artemis and Apollo are twins. Not to mention, even after the whole Apollo situation, the audience sees how uncomfortable Persephone is around Apollo and guys touching her. Meanwhile, Artemis doesn't. She doesn't see the effect Apollo has on Persephone. These were the issues that basically everyone had. For being Persephone's friend, she doesn't seemingly have her best interest in mind. To many, the biggest issue with Artemis is that she isn't that good of a friend. And yeah? Artemis is the goddess of the hunt, which isn't exactly the most social position in the world. But you also have to realize that Artemis isn't exactly the most social person. We see in a recent chapter that her ideal knight is making some microwavable pizza and proclaiming her love for it. Don't get me wrong, I understand that knight. Actually, I don't typically have microwavable pizza, but the point still stands. And if a microwavable pizza isn't good enough way to show her lack of sociability, there are also a lot of other moments that do. We see her alone time, other than microwavable pizzas. She's practicing archery, admiring her knife collection, or turning into animals. These all sound super fun, but she always does it by herself, typically isolated from everyone else. Even in the group the Goddess of Eternal Maidenhood, Artemis doesn't tend to do much, even questioning why they have meetings without the goddess in charge. And when they bring Persephone into the meeting, we see Artemis question her inclusion. They are just treating her like a show pony. Why can't they see that she's miserable? Don't look at me like that. I don't want to get involved. And after getting involved, we see everyone surprised. As Hestia says, "Artemis, what a wonderful gesture. You usually don't have this level of initiative. I'm so proud of you." Artemis isn't that good of a friend because she doesn't have a lot of friends in general. She isn't very social, so she doesn't really understand certain social cues. Which brings us to the biggest reason people have a problem with her. That Artemis doesn't see that Apollo bothers Persephone. Now, a couple things. I'm gonna get into their family in a bit, and while I might be defending Artemis, I am in no way or shape or form defending Apollo. Now, Artemis does pick up that Persephone is slightly uncomfortable around Apollo, and she has asked Apollo a couple times to be less annoying, and even thought herself that Apollo was annoying, but that does bring up a good point. I have two older brothers. I don't typically mention them, mainly because I don't talk about my personal life that much, but I think it's applicable here. I deeply trust my brothers. Yeah, sure, they give me a headache, but I do trust and respect them more than others. It's because I've known them for a while. That whole mere exposure effect thing. The more you see something, the more you like it, the more you respect it, the more you trust it, and the more you would choose it. Artemis has known Apollo her whole life. They're twins. Granted, I don't know how many years that is, since they're gods and all, but it's likely that it's been a while. It makes sense that someone would trust their sibling, even if they didn't deserve it. And what adds more fuel to the fire is her family. Now, Greek mythology has always had a spotty track record when it comes to any type of relationship. Romantic, friendships, or families, basically everyone kind of sucks. As a side note, this is why when any form of media, including webtoon series, wants to do a romantic story about Greek mythology, they always focus on the Hades and Persephone myth, since it's the least problematic one. Anyways, the point is that those family problems apply directly to Artemis, Apollo, and Leto. I'm gonna say her name is Leto because that's what the internet said. Let's first start out with Leto, since we know less about her as she's only been around for one chapter. However, she's already made waves. She looks just so cool, but also terrifying. Her black eyes with her golden pupils, her lack of mouth for most of the chapter, and a black veil that makes it seem like she's ready to attend to anyone's funeral. But what's even more unnerving is her demeanor and the way she speaks. Artemis, I'm disappointed. Didn't I teach you better than to have such an emotional public meltdown for all to see? Look at yourself. What am I gonna do with you? This moment is low-key terrifying. Yeah, her italicized font doesn't help, but especially that last part. Look at Artemis here. She's physically uncomfortable. She almost looks scared when Leto asks what she's gonna do with her. Whatever is causing her to act like this isn't a comforting thought. And we can continue. When Artemis starts to question Apollo with Leto there, she just says, "Honestly, Artemis, who are you gonna believe? Your family? Or some goddess you've just met?" Which makes sense. That's why Artemis doesn't question Apollo to begin with. Because they're family, and you don't question family. But that also leads to the other points I raised. It's likely that Artemis was shamed for having emotions. It's likely she was punished for feeling feelings, leading her to grow up in a place where emotions didn't really matter. This lack of emotion could lead to a less social person, leading to Artemis not 100% understanding social or emotional cues, like when people are uncomfortable, sad, or scared. But what's more interesting is Apollo. Apollo isn't a good god. That's how he's written. He's written to be disliked. The author does a good job at fleshing him out, and this chapter is such a well-written breakdown of these characters. While Artemis wants to get a straight, clear-cut answer to why her friend is hurting, Apollo somehow dodges blame. What's scary isn't Apollo's actions, but his words. He quickly and without hesitation creates imaginary scenarios, talking about how he and Persephone were building an attraction with each other, and how they were growing close and thought they were fulfilling some relationship and blah blah whatever garbage. Apollo's manipulation here is on full blast, trying to convince his sister that he's in the right, that Persephone is misleading her when he's the one doing the misleading. And what's scary is how easily he convinced his mom that his side of the story is the correct side of the story. Apollo has grown accustomed to believing he's in the right, always having someone on his side, whether it be a twin or his mother or both. This made Apollo believe that he deserved whatever he wanted, and no one was safe, from Hera to Zeus and Daphne to Persephone. There likely came a certain point in his life where he started to believe the lies he was telling, as his twisted perception of the world, of people, or of life became his truth. Meanwhile, Leto is somehow the catalyst to Apollo being his worst self and Artemis breaking down. Which does bring us back to Artemis. Artemis, like I said before, was likely punished for having emotions, and thought to only rely on her family, only putting her trust in her brother or her mom. This might be the reason that Artemis was so willing to help out Persephone when they first met, because she knows what it's like to have a mother who isn't emotionally great. I'll get to Demeter eventually. Artemis understands the problem of a problematic parent. And in that state, she probably clung on to the person who was closest, Apollo. There's a theory I saw recently that Artemis in normal Greek mythology is the goddess of the hunt, sure, but also the protector of young girls. And Lore Olympus shows us the story of how she got that role. Artemis was already hot-headed a little bit to begin with, as she keyed the car of the king of Olympus and was very willing to shoot her brother to get to the bottom of things. I think by the end of the series, she'll earn that role. She'll likely confront, challenge, probably not kill, but we'll see Apollo. And in the process protecting Persephone, but also any other god or nymph that Apollo has targeted. Yeah, her family is problematic. And a difficult family like that could explain some of who she is now, but I think she's changing for the better. But that's just what I think. What about you? Do you guys still dislike Artemis, or have I slightly changed your minds? Leave it in the comments below. Oh, also, no new video next week. I'm taking a small break, but that's all for today. So like always, thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you soon.